I have lived long enough to notice something about people. The ones who get overlooked, the quiet ones. The ones nobody expects anything from, they often carry more weight than anyone gives them credit for. And every now and then, life puts them in a moment where the whole world finally has to see what was there all along. I saw it happen once, in a small timber town out west, back when I was still young enough to be surprised. The coin rolled across the wooden floor. Silas Weaver stood at the counter, hands still extended where the shopkeeper had thrown his payment. 3 pennies and a nickel. The nickel had bounced. Now it spun lazy circles near his boot, catching lamplight before it fell flat. Nobody moved to help. Behind him, laughter, low and wet, like men sharing a joke they did not mind him hearing. Silas bent down, his knees cracked, his fingers, calloused and split at the nails, scraped the nickel from between the floorboards. When he straightened, Tom Miller was already serving the next customer, a rancher. Clean hat, silver watch chain. The rancher stepped around Silas without looking. Like stepping around a barrel, an obstacle, nothing more. If you are watching from a small town where folks still look out for one another, I would love to hear where home is for you, and if these stories bring you comfort. Consider subscribing, it helps more than you know. 3 days later, the wind came from the east. Silas felt it before he heard it. The pines groaned. Needles hissed against each other like whispers spreading through a crowd. He set down his axe and wiped his forehead with a sleeve stiff from old sweat. Then he smelled it. Smoke. Not cook-fire smoke. Not the slow curl from a stove. This was sharp, bitter, moving. He turned to the east. Through the gaps in the trees, orange light flickered where there should have been scatte. The axe stayed where it fell. Silas ran. His boots caught on roots, on rocks, on the uneven ground he had worked for years without incident. The wind pushed at his back now, hot and dry, carrying ash that stung his eyes. He blinked, wiped, kept moving. A crack above him. He looked up, a dead pine, its trunk blackened and hollow. Tilted more. The sound it made was not wood splitting, it was a groan. Long and low, like something giving up. He dove left, not far enough. The trunk caught his left ankle. Weight pressed down, not crushing but pinning. He pulled, his boot held, he pulled harder. Pain shot up his calf. Bright and sudden. The leather creaked but did not give. Help? His voice disappeared into the roar of wind and fire. Anybody. Smoke filled his mouth. He coughed, spat, tried again. Through the haze, at the edge of the tree line where the ground sloped toward town, 3 figures stood watching. Men. He could see their shapes against the gray sky hats, shoulders, the outline of coats. Tom. He recognized the stance, the way the man stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt. Tom. I'm here. The figure in the middle turned to the others. Words Silas could not hear. Then, one by one, they walked away, not running, walking, as if they had somewhere better to be. The smoke thickened, his eyes streamed, he clawed at the trunk. Fingernails bending against bark. His throat burned. Each breath brought less air and more heat. The world blurred, gray, orange, black at the edges, and then through the wall of smoke, through the shimmer of heat rising from the forest floor, a shape moved toward him, not walking away, coming closer. The shape became a woman. She moved through the smoke like she belonged to it low. Quick, a wet blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Dark hair, dark eyes, skin the color of desert clay. She did not speak. She did not slow. Silas opened his mouth. No sound came out. His throat had closed around the ash. The woman dropped beside him. Her hands went to the fallen trunk, fingers finding the gap between bark and his boot. She pushed. The wood did not move. She braced her feet against a rock, pushed again. A groan, hers or the tree's. He could not tell. The trunk shifted, 2 inches, 3. Pain flared up his leg as blood returned to places it had been denied. He tried to scream, but the scream was just air escaping. No voice behind it. The woman grabbed his arm, pulled. His boot slid free. The leather had torn at the ankle, exposing raw skin beneath. He tried to stand. His left leg buckled. The ground rose up and struck his shoulder. Then wetness, cold and sudden. The blanket came down over both of them, heavy with water, smelling of river mud and sage. Her arm hooked under his. She hauled him forward. The world became fragments, orange light through wet wool. The crack of branches falling, heat pressing through the blanket like hands trying to find him. His feet dragged. Rocks scraped his heels. He tried to help, to move his legs, but they belonged to someone else now. Smoke thinned, the blanket lifted. He saw sky gray, but sky, not orange, not black. The woman pulled him over uneven ground, down a slope where the air tasted like water instead of ash. Somewhere nearby, a stream ran over stones, then darkness, cool darkness, rock above him, rock beneath. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the light had changed, softer, flickering. A small fire burned 3 feet from where he lay, its smoke curling toward a crack in the stone ceiling. He was in a cave, shallow, maybe 10 feet deep. The entrance showed trees and fading daylight. His left ankle throbbed. He looked down. 2 wooden splints, straight and smooth, held his foot in place. Leather strips wound around them, not rope, not cloth. Deer hide, maybe. The knots were tight and even. The woman sat with her back to him. She crouched near the fire, grinding something in a stone bowl. The sound of it scrape, scrape, scrape filled the silence. Her shoulders moved with each motion. She wore a faded calico blouse, the kind sold at trading posts. Her hair hung in a single braid down her back. Silas tried to speak. His throat caught. He coughed instead. The grinding stopped. The woman did not turn. He watched her pour water into the bowl, stir. The smell reached him bitter, green, like something pulled from the earth with roots still attached. Who? His voice cracked. He swallowed, tried again. Who are you? She kept stirring. The fire popped, shadows danced on the cave walls. Outside. A bird called 1 note. Then silence. Why did you? She stood, turned. Her face was younger than he expected. High cheekbones, a scar, thin and pale, running from her left ear to her jaw. Her eyes held no expression he could read. She walked toward him, knelt, held out the bowl, dark liquid, steam rising. Drink. Her voice was low, flat. The English came easily, but she spoke it like a language she used only when necessary. Silas looked at the bowl, at her face, at the bowl again. What is it? Medicine. For what? She nodded toward his ankle. Swelling, not broken, twisted bad. Drink. He took the bowl. The liquid was warm against his palms. He raised it to his lips. The taste hit first, bitter enough to make his eyes water, with something underneath that might have been bark or root or both. He drank, coughed, drank again. She took the empty bowl back, returned to the fire, sat. The silence stretched, Silas leaned his head against the stone behind him. His body felt heavy, the kind of heavy that comes after a day of hauling timber uphill. But underneath that weight, something else moved, a restlessness, a need to understand. "Those men," he said, "at the edge of the trees, they saw me." The woman added a stick to the fire, said nothing. They walked away. The stick caught. Flames rose, fell back. "You didn't." She poked at the coals. Sparks floated upward, disappearing before they reached the ceiling. Silas waited. His throat hurt. His ankle hurt. But the question sat in his chest like a stone he could not swallow. Why? The woman set down the stick. She looked at him, really looked, for the first time since he had woken. Her eyes moved across his face the way a person looks at a fence post or a rock. Something to measure, nothing more. "Smoke," she said. "I saw smoke from my cave. Came to look." She turned back to the fire. "Sleep," she said. "Tomorrow, you walk." Silas opened his mouth to argue. His body chose for him. The weight pressed down, dragging his eyelids with it. The last thing he saw was the woman's profile against the firelight, still as carved wood. The last thing he heard was the stream outside, running over stones in the dark. And somewhere beneath that sound, footsteps. 2 weeks, 14 mornings waking to the same stone ceiling, 14 nights listening to the stream run past the cave mouth while his ankle throbbed beneath the splints. Silas gripped the walking stick and stood. The wood was smooth under his palm's aspen. He thought, stripped of bark and shaped to fit his hand. She had made it while he slept 3 days ago. He had watched her work on the 4th day, her knife moving in long strokes, peeling away curls of white wood that caught the firelight before falling. He put weight on his left foot. The ankle held. Swelling had gone down enough that he could see the shape of bone again, though the skin remained purple and yellow in patches. 1 step, 2, his right hand squeezed the stick. His left arm reached for balance. 3 steps, 4, he let go of the stick. The cave floor tilted. His left leg buckled. He caught himself on the wall, palm scraping stone, and stood there breathing hard while his heart pounded against his ribs. The woman sat near the entrance, sorting dried herbs into small leather pouches. She did not look up, did not move to help. Her fingers continued their work, pinch, fold, tie as if he were not there at all. Silas pushed off the wall, grabbed the stick. His jaw ached from clenching. "Fine," he said. The word came out thick. She tied another pouch, set it aside, reached for more herbs. He walked to the cave mouth, each step deliberate, the stick striking stone with a sound like a slow heartbeat. Outside, the morning air smelled of pine and earth, still damp from last night's rain. The stream ran clear over brown rocks. Birds called from somewhere in the trees. The woman stood, brushed her hands on her skirt, walked past him and down the slope toward the water without looking back. Silas followed. The trail was narrow, barely a trail at all, just pressed grass and exposed roots winding through juniper and scrub oak. His stick found purchase on rocks. His left foot dragged slightly with each step, the ankle complaining but holding. She moved ahead of him, never fast, never slow. When he stumbled over a root, she paused. When he caught up, she continued. No words, no glances, just movement through the trees. They walked for what felt like an hour, maybe longer. The sun climbed. Sweat gathered at his collar and under his arms. His hands cramped around the stick. Then the trees opened, and he saw it, or what was left of it. The shack stood no more, in its place, a rectangle of ash and charred timber. The stone chimney remained, blackened but upright, pointing at the sky like a broken finger. Everything else, the walls he had built, the roof he had patched each spring, the door he had hung himself, gone. Silas stopped at the edge of the clearing. His legs would not carry him closer. The woman walked into the ash. Her moccasins left prints in the gray dust. She bent, picked up a length of timber, examined it, tossed it aside, picked up another. This one she kept, setting it near the chimney. "What are you doing?" She did not answer. Her hands found a piece of the iron stove, twisted and black. She set it next to the timber. I said, "What are you doing?" Another piece of wood. Another examination, this one thrown away. "I didn't ask for your help." She crouched near what had been the corner of his cabin. Her fingers pushed through ash and pulled out a handful of nails, bent and fused together by heat. She studied them, dropped them into a small pile. "You hear me? I didn't ask." She stood, looked at him. Her face showed nothing, not anger, not pity, not the satisfaction of proving a point, just the same flat calm she had worn since the cave. Then she turned back to the ash and continued working. Silas stood at the edge of the clearing. The stick dug into the soft ground. His breath came hard. Though he had not moved, his throat tightened around words that would not form. He watched her sort through the wreckage of his life. Wood that might be salvageable here, scrap there, the broken handle of his axe, the twisted remains of his coffee pot. She moved through it all with the same steady purpose, as if she had done this before, as if rebuilding from nothing was just another task, like grinding herbs or tying pouches. His left leg trembled. The ankle sent sharp signals up his calf. He limped into the ash. The first step sank 2 inches. The second found something solid beneath a floor joist, maybe, or part of the frame. He worked his way toward where the woman crouched near the chimney. She had found his iron skillet. The handle had broken off, but the pan itself looked whole. She held it up to the light, checking for cracks. "That was my mother's." She set it in the salvage pile without comment. Silas lowered himself beside her, his left leg stretched out, the ankle pulsing with each heartbeat. He reached into the ash and pulled out a length of chain, the one he had used to hang the water bucket by the door. The links were still connected, blackened, but solid. He set it next to the skillet. They worked in silence. The sun moved overhead. Ash covered his hands, his clothes, his face where he wiped sweat away. The pile of salvageable items grew slowly nails. Hinges, a hammerhead, a length of wire, the blade of his saw. The pile of ruined things grew faster. By midday, his back ached from bending. His ankle had swollen again, pressing against the splints. He sat on a stone near the chimney and watched the woman carry a final armload of useful timber to the pile. She set it down, straightened, looked at what they had gathered, not much. A skillet without a handle, some nails, tools that would need new hafts, wood that might serve as framing if it held. "It's not enough," Silas said. The woman walked to the edge of the clearing where the trees began. She stood there, looking at something he could not see from where he sat. "Come," she said. He pushed himself up, limped toward her. She pointed through the trees, 1/2 a mile away. Maybe less. Smoke rose from a chimney, a cabin, small but intact, sat in another clearing. Clothes hung on a line outside. A garden plot showed green against the brown earth. "Whose place is that?" Silas asked. The woman turned. Her eyes met his for the first time that day. "Widow," she said. "2 children. Roof leaks." She started walking back toward the ash pile. Stopped. Looked over her shoulder. "You fix roofs." The wood felt wrong in his hands. Silas turned the timber over, examining the grain. It looked fine. Straight. No visible knots. He had cut it himself 2 days ago, from a stand of pine on the north slope. Dragged it back with rope over his shoulder, while his ankle complained with each step. Ayanna took it from him, held it to her ear, knocked twice with her knuckle. The sound was dull, flat, like striking a wet drum. She set it aside and picked up another piece from the pile. Same knock. This time the sound rang out sharp, clean, a note that hung in the morning air for half a breath before fading. "Here." She held the second timber toward him. Silas took it, knocked, the same clear ring. "Dry," Ayanna said. She pointed to the first timber, still lying in the grass. "Wet. Inside still wet. Use now. It warps, cracks, falls apart in 2 winters." Silas looked at the discarded wood, then at the pile he had spent 3 days gathering. Half of it, maybe more, would make the same dull sound. "I've been using wet wood my whole life." Ayanna's shoulders moved, not quite a shrug, more like an acknowledgement of something that did not need saying. She turned back to the work. The frame they were building sat where his old cabin had stood. Same footprint, same orientation toward the morning sun. But the construction was different. No nails held these joints together. Instead, Ayanna had shown him how to cut notches into the timber, how to shape the ends so they locked together like fingers interlacing. Mortise and tenon, she called it, though the words came out broken, like she had learned them from someone who spoke little. Silas picked up the chisel. The handle was new. He had shaped it himself from a branch of mountain ash, fitting it to the old blade they had salvaged from the ashes. His palms had blistered the first day. Now calluses were forming over the raw spots. He set the chisel against the wood, positioned the mallet, struck. The blade bit into the timber. Chips flew. He struck again. The notch deepened, its edges rough but straight. Ayanna watched without comment. When he finished, she ran her finger along the cut, nodded once, moved to the next joint. By midday, the first wall frame lay complete on the ground. 4 timbers, locked together at the corners, solid enough that when Silas pushed against it, nothing shifted, nothing creaked. He stood back and looked at it. In 32 years, he had never built anything that felt this solid. His old cabin had leaned from the day he raised it, walls that bowed, a door that stuck, a roof that shed rain in some places and held it in others. He had patched and propped and reinforced, always fighting against his own poor work. This was different. This would stand. Ayanna was already gathering tools, moving toward the stream to wash the sawdust from her hands. Silas watched her go, then looked back at the frame. His chest felt strange, tight, but not the tightness of grief or anger. Something else, something he could not name. That evening, they ate beside the fire. The rabbit had been caught in one of Ayanna's snares, a simple loop of plant fiber, hidden along a game trail where the grass showed signs of frequent passing. She had shown him how to set it 3 days ago, how to read the ground for tracks, the brush for droppings, the air for the faint musk of animal presence. He had failed twice. The third snare held. Now the meat roasted on sticks propped over the flames, fat dripping and sizzling on the coals. The smell filled the clearing rich, savory. Nothing like the salt pork and hardtack that had been his diet for years. Silas turned his stick. The meat was browning unevenly. He adjusted the angle, trying to match the way Ayanna had positioned hers. "Your father," he said. The words came before he could stop them. He had been wondering for days, watching her work, watching her move through tasks with a certainty he did not understand. "He taught you all this?" The fire crackled, a log shifted, sending sparks upward. "My father made medicine." Ayanna did not look up from the flames. "He taught me to listen." She pulled her stick from the fire, tested the meat with her finger, set it back. Silas waited for more. The story of where she came from, why she lived alone in a cave, why she had walked into a burning forest for a man she did not know. Nothing came. The fire burned lower. They ate in silence, grease coating their fingers. The taste of wild game sharp and unfamiliar on his tongue. When the bones were bare, Ayanna buried them in the ash at the edge of the fire pit, returned to her place, stared into the coals. Silas wiped his hands on his trousers. The question sat in his throat, the same one he had asked in the cave, the one she had never answered. He let it stay there. Morning came gray and cool, clouds sitting low on the peaks to the west. Ayanna was already awake when Silas opened his eyes. Crouched near a patch of ground she had cleared beside the cabin frame, she held a leather pouch in one hand. Her other hand worked a pointed stick into the soil, making holes in neat rows. "What are you doing? Planting?" She did not look up. Silas rose, his ankle held firm. The swelling had gone down to almost nothing now, though a deep ache still lived in the joint when he walked too long. He crossed to where she worked and lowered himself to his knees beside her. The holes were shallow, 3 inches deep, maybe 4, spaced a hand's width apart in rows that ran straight as string lines. Ayanna opened the pouch. Inside, seeds, small, pale, wrinkled like old skin. "Beans," she said. "And squash." She pointed to a second pouch at her hip. "Plant together. Beans climb the squash. Squash shades the beans." She reached into the first pouch, pulled out 3 seeds, dropped them into a single hole. 3 mud. Silas frowned. "Why 3? Ayanna moved to the next hole. 3 more seeds. 1 for the worm. Drop. 1 for the drought. Drop. 1 for you. Drop. She covered the hole with bun, patted it down, moved on. Silas stared at the row of small mounds. 1 for the worm, 1 for the drought, 1 for him, as if loss was expected. Built into the act of planting, as if you gave to the world knowing the world would take, and you planted anyway. Because what else could you do? He reached for the pouch. Ayanna handed it over without comment. His fingers found 3 seeds. He dropped them into the next hole, covered them, patted the soil the way she had done. Then he did it again and again. The clouds broke. Sunlight fell across the clearing in long slants, warming his back as he worked. Sweat gathered at his temples. His knees ached from kneeling. But his hands kept moving whole. Seeds, cover, pat until the pouch was empty and the garden plot stretched behind them in neat rows of small mounds. Silas sat back on his heels, looked at what they had made. Something stirred in his chest, rose through his throat, escaped before he could stop it. A laugh, short, surprised, almost a cough, but a laugh. Ayanna glanced at him. Her face showed nothing, but the corner of her mouth moved, just slightly, before she turned back to the empty pouches in her lap. Silas laughed again, longer this time. He could not have said why. The garden would not feed him for months. if it grew at all. The cabin was still just a frame on the ground. His ankle still ached. His old life still lay in ashes 10 feet away. But he was laughing when the sound faded. He became aware of something else, a stillness in Ayana's posture, the way her head had turned, not toward him, but toward the tree line, listening. Silas followed her gaze. Nothing moved among the pines, no sound but wind in the branches. Then distant, but distinct, the crack of a twig under a boot. The footsteps belonged to a deer. Silas watched it emerge from the pines, a doe, young, her ears swiveling as she tested the air. She stood at the edge of the clearing for 3 heartbeats, then turned and vanished back into the shadows. Ayana returned to gathering the empty seed pouches, her shoulders relaxed by a degree Silas would not have noticed a month ago. But he noticed now, 5 weeks since the fire. 5 weeks of watching her move, listening to her silences, learning to read the language of her body the way she read tracks in the dirt. He knew when she was concerned, a slight tension in her jaw, when she was satisfied, the smallest release of breath through her nose, when she was teaching, the deliberate slowness of her hands, giving him time to see each motion before she completed it. The next morning, she handed him a list, not written. She did not write, but spoken, item by item, while he repeated each one back to her: salt, rope, a file for the saw blade, nails, if he could find them cheap. Town, she said. It was not a question. Silas looked at the walking stick leaning against the cabin frame. His ankle had healed enough that he no longer needed it for balance, but he had kept it anyway. The smooth aspen wood familiar in his grip. I can go alone. Ayana said nothing. She was already walking toward the stream, a clay pot in her hands. The road to Copper Creek took 2 hours on foot. Silas walked it slowly, testing his ankle on the uneven ground, feeling the joint flex and hold with each step. The morning was cool, clouds moving fast overhead, the smell of rain somewhere to the west. He reached town before noon. The main street looked the same as it always had. Dust, hitching posts, the general store on the corner with its faded sign, Miller's Goods and Sundries. Silas had bought supplies here for 6 years, salt and flour, coffee and tobacco, the small necessities that kept a man alive in the hills. He pushed open the door. The bell rang. 3 heads turned. Tom Miller stood behind the counter, a pencil behind his ear, a ledger open before him. 2 other men sat near the potbelly stove ranchers. By the look of their boots, one held a cup of coffee, the other had a newspaper spread across his knees. Silas walked to the counter. His boots sounded loud on the wooden floor, each step deliberate, each step carrying him forward without the hitch or drag that had marked his gait for weeks. The walking stick stayed in his left hand, but he did not lean on it. Tom Miller looked up. His eyes moved from Silas's face to his boots, to the stick and back again. Well. The words came slow, stretched like taffy. Weaver. Reckon you ain't dead after all. Silas set his hand on the counter. Salt, 2 pounds, rope, 20 feet, a file for a crosscut saw. Tom did not move. His eyes held something new, not the indifference of before, but a sharpness, curiosity mixed with something darker. Heard some things about you. Weaver. The men by the stove shifted. The one with the newspaper folded it closed. Salt, Silas repeated. Rope, file. Heard you been keeping company. Tom's lip curled. Not quite a smile. Shacking up with some squaw out in the hills, that true. The air in the store thickened. Silas felt it press against his skin, warm and close, despite the cool morning outside. His fingers tightened around the walking stick. The man with the coffee cup spoke without looking up. "Gone native. They're saying living like an Indian, eating what they eat, sleeping where they sleep." Laughter, low and mean. Silas turned. The movement was slow, deliberate. He faced the two men by the stove. Neither met his eyes. The one with the newspaper suddenly found something interesting in its folds. The other stared into his coffee. Silas looked at them, said nothing. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2, 3. Then he turned back to the counter, reached into his pocket, pulled out 3 coins, 2 dimes, and a nickel, and set them on the wood with a click that sounded loud as a gunshot in the quiet store. Salt, rope, file. Tom Miller's jaw worked. His hand moved toward the coins, stopped, moved again. He swept them into his palm without counting. The supplies came wrapped in brown paper. Silas took them, tucked the package under his arm, walked to the door. "Weaver." He stopped, did not turn. "You come back here smelling like her. I'll have the sheriff run you out of town. You hear me?" Silas pushed open the door. The bell rang again, cheerful and bright. He stepped into the street and walked toward the edge of town, the package solid against his ribs, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He did not look back. The walk home took longer. His ankle began to ache after the first mile. A dull throb that matched his heartbeat, but he did not stop, did not rest. The anger in his chest needed movement, needed the rhythm of boots on dirt, needed somewhere to go that was not back toward that store and those men and their small, ugly words. By the time he reached the clearing, the sun had dropped behind the western peaks. Ayanna sat beside the fire, stirring something in the iron pot. The smell reached him beans, he thought, and some kind of green that grew wild near the stream. She did not look up as he approached. Silas set the package on the ground, lowered himself onto the log they used for sitting. His hands trembled. He pressed them against his thighs to still them. "They know," he said. Ayanna stirred. The wooden spoon made slow circles in the pot. "About you. About us. They're calling me." He stopped. The words stuck in his throat like bones. Ayanna lifted the spoon, tapped it twice against the rim, set it aside, and... The question hung between them. Silas stared at the fire. The flames danced and shifted, throwing shadows across the half-built walls of the cabin. His cabin, built with wood he had cut, joints he had shaped, skills she had taught him. "I wanted to hit him." Ayanna said nothing. Tom Miller, standing there behind his counter with that look on his face. "I wanted to..." He broke off, shook his head. "But I didn't." The fire popped. Sparks rose and died. "Good," Ayanna said. Silas looked at her. She was watching him now, her face lit orange by the flames, her eyes steady and dark. "Good. A man who hits when he is angry is easy." She picked up the spoon again, resumed stirring. "A man who stands when he is angry, harder." Silas turned back to the fire. His hands had stopped trembling. The anger still sat in his chest, but it had changed shape somehow, solidified into something he could carry instead of something that carried him. "The widow," Ayanna said. "Down the slope. Martha." Silas frowned. "What about her?" "2 children. The boy is 12, old enough to learn." She lifted the spoon, tested the beans. "You will teach him." The words did not make sense. Silas turned them over in his mind, looking for meaning. Teach him what I taught you. Snares, planting, how to hear if wood is dry. She set the spoon down, met his eyes. They have no food for winter, no man to hunt, no one to show the boy. They hate me. The boy does not hate, the boy is hungry. Silas opened his mouth to argue, closed it. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with its small, insistent voice. And Martha. Ayanna stood, walked to where the package lay unopened on the ground, began untying the string. She does not hate, she said, her back to him. She has no time for hate. She has 2 children and a roof that leaks, and no one in this town who will help her. She pulled the salt from the wrapping, set it aside. Until now. Ayanna left at dawn. She said 3 words. 3 days. Listen. Then she walked into the trees, her leather bag over her shoulder, her braids swinging against her back. And she was gone. Silas stood in the clearing, watching the space where she had disappeared. The morning air smelled of pine and wood smoke. A jay called from somewhere in the canopy. The cabin frame cast long shadows across the garden plot. He was alone. The first day passed slowly. He worked on the cabin walls, fitting timbers into the frame they had built together. His hands remembered the motions: chisel, mallet, strike, check, but without her presence. Each movement felt hollow, uncertain. He second-guessed every cut, measured twice, 3 times, 4 times. Still the joints came out crooked, the notches too shallow or too deep. By evening, he had ruined 3 good boards. He sat by the fire and ate cold beans from the pot she had left. The flames threw shadows across the unfinished walls. Wind moved through the gaps where the roof should be, carrying the smell of approaching rain. Sleep came hard and left easy. He woke in the dark, heart pounding, the dream already fading. Something about fire, something about men walking away. The second day brought rain. Silas worked anyway, hunched under an oilcloth stretched between poles, water dripping down his neck and soaking through his shirt. The timber grew slick. His grip slipped. The mallet came down wrong, glancing off the chisel and striking his thumb. The pain was bright and immediate. He dropped the tools, pressed his thumb against his chest, watched blood well up beneath the nail, dark against the pale skin. He did not curse, did not cry out, just sat in the mud beneath the oilcloth, rain drumming overhead, blood seeping into his shirt, and felt something crack inside him. What was he doing? The question rose unbidden. He had no answer. A month ago, he had been a failure. A man who built crooked cabins and cut wet wood and lived alone because no one in town could stand him. Now here he sat, bleeding in the rain, pretending to be something he was not. A builder, a student, a man who might teach others. The laugh that escaped him was ugly, wet. It caught in his throat and turned into something else, a sound he did not recognize, coming from somewhere deep in his chest. He stood, walked out from under the oilcloth, let the rain hit his face, his shoulders, his outstretched hands. The water was cold. It ran down his cheeks and into his collar and soaked through every layer until he stood shivering in the mud, alone, with nothing but the sound of the storm. His foot slipped. The fall was sudden, one moment upright, the next sprawled on his back in the muck. Rain driving into his open eyes, mud sucking at his clothes. He tried to rise. His hands found no purchase. He slid deeper, the wet earth pulling at him like fingers. He lay there. The rain fell. The mud held him. And Silas Weaver, 32 years old, felt the last of his pretense drain away into the cold ground beneath him. He was nothing. had always been nothing, would always be nothing. The woman from the cave had tried to make him into something else, but she was gone now, and without her he was just a man lying in the mud, too tired to stand, too hollow to try. Time passed. He did not know how much. The rain softened from a downpour to a drizzle. His teeth chattered. His fingers had gone numb. Move. The word came from somewhere inside him. Not a voice, just an instinct. Old and stubborn. Move, or die here. He rolled onto his side. Mud squelched against his ear. He pushed with his elbow, then his palm. His knees found solid ground beneath the muck. He crawled. The fire pit was 10 feet away. He reached it, shaking. Covered in mud from chest to boots, his hands leaving dark prints on every stone he touched. The coals still glowed beneath a layer of ash. He fed them with dry wood from the covered stack. His fingers clumsy, his whole body trembling. The flames rose, slowly, sputtering against damp bark before catching true. He stripped off his shirt, wrung it out, hung it on a stick near the fire. His skin prickled with cold. His thumb still throbbed beneath its ruined nail. On the workbench, he saw them. The seed pouches, empty now. But he had saved a handful back, keeping them in a jar beside his bedroll. For what? He could not say. Some vague notion of planting more come spring. He picked up the jar. The seeds inside were pale, wrinkled, worthless-looking things, small enough to lose between floorboards, one for the worm, one for the drought, one for you. He walked to the fire, held the jar over the flames. The glass grew warm against his palm. What was the point? The garden would fail, the cabin would fall. She would return to find him exactly as he had been before Ustless, alone. A man who could not even stand up when the rain knocked him down. His hand tightened on the jar. Then he looked at the garden. The rain had stopped. Clouds were breaking apart overhead, letting moonlight through in silver shafts. And there, in those pale beams of light green, Silas stepped closer. His bare feet sank into cold mud. He did not care. He walked to the nearest row and crouched down. His face inches from the soil, sprouts, tiny, pale, no bigger than his smallest fingernail, but there, pushing up through the earth toward light they could not yet see, 10 days in the ground, 10 days of rain and sun and waiting. And they had grown anyway. He touched one with his finger. The leaf was soft, fragile, alive, one for the worm, one for the drought, one for you. He had planted these, his hands, following her guidance, his fingers, dropping seeds into holes, his palms patting down the soil. They had grown anyway. Silas sat back in the mud. The jar of seeds hung loose in his grip. The fire crackled behind him, warming his bare back. The moon moved slowly overhead. He did not plant the remaining seeds, did not throw them in the fire, just sat there in the dark, watching the sprouts he had almost given up on, while the night grew quiet around him. The third day came gray and cool. Silas woke with the taste of mud still in his mouth, his body stiff from sleeping on the ground near the fire. He rose, washed his face in the stream, put on his damp shirt because it was all he had. Then he looked toward the slope that led down to Martha's cabin. Half a mile away, 2 children, a roof that leaked. His thumb throbbed, his muscles ached. His pride lay somewhere in the mud of the night before, trampled beyond recognition. But his feet carried him forward anyway, down the slope, through the trees, toward the thin line of smoke rising from a chimney in the distance. He was halfway there when he heard the scream. The scream came from a child. Silas broke into a run. His ankle protested a sharp twinge with each stride, but he pushed through it. Branches whipped his face. Roots caught at his boots. The slope steepened, then leveled out into the small clearing where Martha's cabin stood. A boy hung from the edge of the roof. His fingers gripped the wooden shingles, white-knuckled, his legs dangling over a 10-foot drop. Below him, a woman stood with her arms raised, reaching for feet that swung just beyond her grasp. "Hold on. Tommy, hold on!" The boy's face was red. Tears streaked through the dirt on his cheeks. His fingers slipped. An inch, 2. Silas did not think. He crossed the yard in 5 strides, grabbed the ladder lying flat in the grass, the same ladder the boy must have climbed, now fallen, and swung it upright against the cabin wall. The wood struck shingles with a crack that made the boy flinch. "Don't move." Silas was already climbing. "Don't let go. I'm coming." The rungs groaned under his weight. He climbed fast, hand over hand, until his head cleared the roofline, and he could see the boy's fingers, 2 on the left hand, 3 on the right, gripping a split shingle that had pulled half free from the roof. "Look at me." The boy's eyes found his, wide, wet, terrified. "I'm going to grab your wrist. When I do, you let go of the roof. Understand?" The boy nodded, or tried to. His whole body shook. Silas reached out. His fingers closed around the boy's left wrist, thin, bony, slick with sweat. He pulled. The boy let go. The weight swung into him. Silas braced his feet against the ladder, his free hand gripping the rung, and held on while the boy scrambled for purchase against his chest. Small fingers dug into his shirt. A knee struck his ribs. Then the boy had him. Arms wrapped tight around his neck. Face pressed into his shoulder. Silas climbed down. 1 rung, 2. The ladder shook but held. His arms burned. His ankle screamed. But he kept moving, kept descending, until his boots touched solid ground and the woman was there, pulling the boy from his arms, pressing the child against her chest. "Tommy, Tommy, oh, thank the Lord, Tommy." The boy sobbed into her dress. The woman's hands moved over his hair, his back, his arms checking, touching, making sure he was whole. Silas stepped back. His breath came hard. His shirt was soaked sweat, and the boy's tears and the dampness still clinging from yesterday's rain. He looked at the roof. A section of shingles had rotted through, leaving a dark gap where water would pour in with every storm. "He was trying to fix it," the woman said. Her voice cracked. "I told him not to. I told him to wait. But we had rain last night, and the bed got soaked, and he—" She broke off. Her eyes met Silas's for the first time. Recognition moved across her face. The fear did not leave, but something else joined it: confusion. Maybe. Or the beginning of understanding. "You're Weaver," she said. "The one who, the roof needs new shingles." Silas nodded toward the gap. That whole section. The wood underneath might be rotted too. Hard to tell from down here. The woman Martha stared at him. The boy had stopped crying, his face still buried in her dress, his small hands clutching the faded fabric. "Why are you here?" Silas had no answer that would make sense. He thought of Ayanna, her flat voice saying the widow's roof leaks. He thought of the sprouts in his garden, pushing through the earth toward light they could not see. He thought of himself lying in the mud, ready to give up, and the green shoots that had pulled him back. "I can fix roofs," he said. Martha's arms tightened around her son. Her jaw worked. Whatever she wanted to say, whatever questions or accusations or suspicions Vadai lived behind her eyes, she swallowed them. "We have no money." "I don't want money." The boy lifted his head. His eyes were red, his cheeks streaked with tears and snot. But he looked at Silas without flinching. "You're the man who lives with the Indian lady." "Tommy." Martha's hand pressed against his mouth. Silas crouched down. His knee popped. He ignored it. "That's right," he said. "She taught me some things. How to fix roofs, how to catch rabbits, how to plant beans so they grow even when the world takes its share." The boy's eyes widened. "You can catch rabbits. Tommy, hush. I can teach you." Silas held the boy's gaze. "If your mother says it's all right." Martha's hand dropped from her son's mouth. She looked at Silas. They really looked. The way you look at a man you are trying to understand, and whatever she saw made her shoulders drop by an inch. "Fix the roof first," she said. "Then we'll talk about rabbits." The roof took 3 days. Silas worked from dawn until his arms gave out, then rested, then worked again. He tore away the rotted shingles and the soft wood beneath. He cut new boards from timber he had dragged from his own salvage pile. He shaped each shingle with a hand axe, beveling the edges so water would run off instead of seeping through. Tommy watched from below. On the second day, he climbed the ladder and sat on the solid part of the roof, passing tools when Silas asked for them. By the third day, he was hammering nails crooked at first, then straighter, then almost true. "Like this." The boy held up a shingle he had shaped himself. Silas took it, examined the edges. The bevel was uneven, deeper on one side than the other, but the wood was sound, and the shape was close enough. "It'll work," he said. "Put it there, in the corner. Nail it down." The boy's face split into a grin. He scrambled across the roof with the shingle clutched against his chest and set to work, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he positioned each nail. Martha stood in the doorway below, watching. She did not smile, but the hardness in her face had softened, and when Silas climbed down that evening, she pressed a cup of water into his hands without being asked. "Thank you," she said. The words came stiff, like she was not used to saying them. Silas drank. The water was cool and clean. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll show him the snares." The snares took longer to teach. Tommy had quick hands but no patience. He wanted to catch rabbits now, today, this very minute. He did not understand why they had to walk so far from the cabin, why they had to crouch in silence, why the loops had to be tied just so and placed just here and not anywhere else. "The rabbit knows," Silas said. They were deep in the woods, kneeling beside a game trail worn smooth by small feet. "He's been walking this path his whole life. If something changes, a new smell, a shadow in the wrong place, he'll know. And he won't come." Tommy scowled at the snare in his hands. "How do you know what rabbits think?" "I don't, but she taught me to watch, to see what they do. Not what I think they do. That's different." The boy fell silent. His fingers moved over the loop, adjusting, tightening. When he set it beside the trail, the placement was almost perfect. "Now we wait," Silas said. They walked back to the cabin. The next morning, Silas returned alone. The snare was empty. He reset it, adjusted the angle, covered his tracks with dead leaves. The morning after that, Tommy came with him. They crouched behind a fallen log and watched the sun rise through the trees, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. The snare moved. Tommy started forward. Silas caught his arm, held him still, a rabbit brown, fat. Its nose twitching hopped along the trail. It paused at the snare, sniffed, hopped closer. The loop closed around its leg. Tommy was up before Silas could stop him. The boy ran to the snare, his boots pounding the frozen ground, and stood over the rabbit with his hands pressed to his mouth. "I caught it," he whispered. "I caught it." Silas showed him how to dispatch the animal quickly, how to carry it so the blood did not stain his clothes, how to reset the snare for the next time. They walked back through the trees, the rabbit swinging from Tommy's belt, the boy's face bright with something Silas remembered from long ago. Pride, the kind that comes from doing a thing yourself, with your own hands, for the first time. Martha stood in the doorway when they emerged from the woods. Tommy ran toward her. "Mama, I caught it. I caught a rabbit." He held up the animal, still warm, its fur soft in the morning light. Martha's hands rose to her face. Her eyes went wet. She looked at her son, then at Silas standing at the edge of the yard. She did not speak, but she nodded once, slow. Silas nodded back. He was walking toward the trail home when he saw the old man sitting on a stump at the edge of Martha's property. Gray beard, patched coat, a hat that had seen better decades. "You're Weaver," the old man said. "The one teaching the boy." Silas stopped. "That's right. Name's Jeb." The old man stood, his knees cracked. "Heard you know how to plant beans." "I know a little. Little's more than I got." Jeb tugged at his beard. "My back's been no good for bending. My eyes ain't what they were, but I got a patch of ground behind my shack that's been fallow 3 years. You reckon you could show me what to do with it?" Silas looked back toward Martha's cabin. Tommy stood in the doorway now, the rabbit still in his hands, showing to his little sister how big it was. Martha had her arm around both of them. "Tomorrow," Silas said. "Bring a shovel if you have one." He walked home through the trees. The sun climbed overhead. Birds called from the branches. And somewhere behind him, in a small cabin with a new roof, a boy was learning that he could feed his family. The clearing came into view. Smoke rose from the fire pit. A figure sat beside it, stirring something in the iron pot. Ayanna was back. Silas stopped at the edge of the clearing. Ayanna sat with her back to him, stirring the pot, her braid hanging dark against her faded calico blouse. The fire crackled. Smoke curled upward through the gap in the cabin's unfinished roof. Everything looked exactly as it had when she left. Except the cabin walls were higher now. Except the garden showed green rows of beans climbing toward the light. Except Silas himself stood straighter than he had in years. His hands steady at his sides, he walked forward. His boots crunched on dry leaves. Ayanna did not turn. 3 days, he said. She lifted the spoon, tasted, added something from a pouch at her hip. 4, she said. The trail was long. Silas lowered himself onto the lay across from her. The fire warmed his face, the smell from the pot venison. He thought, with wild onion and something bitter he could not name, made his stomach tighten with hunger. "The widow's roof is fixed," he said. "Her boy caught his first rabbit this morning, and there's an old man named Jeb. I'm teaching him to plant tomorrow." Ayanna stirred, said nothing. "You were right." The words came harder than he expected. "About all of it. About them not hating, about the boy being hungry, about—" He stopped. His throat had closed around whatever came next. Ayanna lifted the pot from the fire, set it on a flat stone to cool. Her movements were slow and deliberate, the same way she did everything. "You fell," she said. Silas blinked. "What?" She pointed to his shirt. The mud stains had dried to pale brown streaks across his chest and back. He had not thought to change, had not thought about how he looked at all. "In the rain," he said. "I slipped, and—" The question hung in the air between them. Silas looked at the fire, at the pot, at his own hands, calloused and cracked, resting on his knees. "And I got back up?" Iana nodded. She reached for the bowls she had carved from cottonwood, 2 of them, smooth and light, and began ladling stew. They ate in silence. The venison was tender. The broth was rich. Silas scraped his bowl clean and set it aside, and Iana refilled it without being asked. When the meal was finished, she stood, walked to the cabin, ran her hand along the wall he had built in her absence, the joints tight, the timbers straight, the notches cut clean and deep. "Good," she said, one word. But Silas felt it settle into his chest like a stone dropped into still water. The days that followed passed like water through fingers. Silas taught Jeb to plant beans. The old man's back was bad, so Tommy came to help digging holes while Jeb dropped seeds and Silas covered them with soil. 3 to a hole, 1 for the worm, 1 for the drought, 1 for you. Iana watched from the edge of the clearing, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. When they finished, she walked back toward the cabin without speaking. That night, she made tea from leaves she had gathered in the mountains. The taste was sharp and clean, like breathing cold air. Silas drank it slowly, letting the warmth spread through his chest. "The boy learns fast," Iana said. "He does. The old man is stubborn. He is." She set her cup aside, looked at him across the fire. "You will teach more." Silas thought of the faces in town, the sneers, the whispered insults, the way Tom Miller had threatened to run him out if he came back. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe, if they'll listen." Iana nodded. She stood, walked to the edge of the firelight, stopped. "I go tomorrow." The words hit him like cold water. He set his cup down too hard. Tea sloshed over the rim. "Go where?" "Home." She did not turn. "My people. The mountains. For how long?" Silence. The fire popped. An owl called from somewhere in the dark. "Iana." She turned then. Her face was lit half by fire, half by shadow. Her eyes held something he had never seen there before, not thatness. Exactly. Something quieter, something that had been there all along, waiting for him to notice. "You do not need me now," she said. Silas opened his mouth to argue, to say she was wrong, to say he would always need her, that without her he would slide back into the mud and never get up again. But the words would not come, because they were not true. He looked at his hands, at the cabin walls rising around them, at the garden stretching dark and green in the moonlight, all of it built with skills she had taught him, all of it standing because he had learned to stand himself. "The boy," he said finally. "Tommy, he asks about you. He wants to know how you move so quiet through the woods." The corner of Iana's mouth shifted, not quite a smile, something smaller. "Then teach him," she said. She walked to the cabin, lay down on the blankets she had spread near the wall, closed her eyes. Silas sat by the fire until the coals burned low. Then he lay down on his own blankets and stared at the stars through the gap in the roof and did not sleep for a long time. Morning came, gray and cold. Silas woke to silence. The blankets across the cabin lay flat and empty. The fire had gone to ash. He sat up. His chest felt hollow. "Iana." No answer. Just the sound of the stream running past the clearing and the wind moving through the pines. He crossed to where she had slept. Her blankets were folded neat and small. Beside them, on the flat stone she used for grinding herbs, two things sat waiting. A leather pouch, heavy with seeds, a bracelet, turquoise beads strung on sinew. The same bracelet she had worn for every day since he first opened his eyes in the cave. No letter, no note, no words. Silas picked up the bracelet. The beads were smooth against his palm, worn by years of pressing against her skin. He held it to his nose. It smelled of sage and wood smoke and something else, something he would never be able to name, but would always recognize. He sat there for a long time. The sun rose. The shadows shortened. The garden came alive with color as light found the leaves. When he finally stood, his legs were stiff. He walked to the fire pit, stirred the ashes, found coals still glowing at the bottom, and fed them with kindling until flames rose. He made coffee in the iron pot she had taught him to season, poured it into the tin cup that had survived the fire, walked to the edge of the clearing, and sat on the stump there, facing east. The cup warm between his hands. The mountains rose in the distance, blue and gray and purple, layered like cloth, somewhere in those folds and ridges. She was walking home. Silas raised his cup, toward the mountains, toward her. "Thank you," he said. The words disappeared into the morning air, but he had said them, and that was enough. A sound from the trail, footsteps, running. Tommy burst from the trees, his face red, his arms pumping. He skidded to a stop in front of Silas, chest heaving, grin splitting his face. "Mr. Silas, 3 rabbits. I caught 3 this morning." 3. Silas looked at the boy, at the joy in his eyes, at the dirt on his hands, and the leaves in his hair, and the pride that radiated from every inch of his small body. He set down his cup, stood, picked up his hat from the stump, and settled it on his head. "Show me," he said. They walked into the trees together. The sun climbed overhead, laying gold across the grass. Behind them, the cabin stood solid and square, its walls rising toward a roof that would be finished before the first frost. Beside it, the garden grew beans climbing their poles, squash spreading their broad leaves, seeds becoming plants, becoming food. And in the mountains, somewhere beyond sight, a woman walked home, carrying nothing, leaving everything behind. There is a quietness that comes after a story like this, a tender kind of weight that sits in the chest and does not ask to be explained. Perhaps you felt it too, that familiar ache of watching someone find their footing after years of stumbling alone. The way Silas learned to stand, not because anyone told him he could, but because a woman walked into fire and handed him the chance. Many of us have known what it means to be overlooked, to carry something heavy without being asked how we are doing, to give without recognition, or to receive kindness from the last person we expected. These are old feelings. They live in us longer than we admit, and it is all right if this story did not tie itself into a neat bow. Some things are meant to stay open. Some goodbyes happen off the page, in the mountains, where we cannot follow. We do not need to understand why she left. We only need to know that she did, and that he kept going anyway. Thank you for sitting with this story until the end. It has been good to have you here.